Welcome back to the Health Longevity Secret Show, and I'm your host, Dr. Robert Lufkin. Therapeutic carbohydrate restriction is no longer a fringe practice and is now increasingly recognized for its value in diabetes, obesity, neurodegenerative disease, stroke, heart disease, and even some cancers. Clinical guidelines and a standard of care about the practice will help accelerate this change. Doug Reynolds is the founder and CEO of LowCarbUSA and president of the Society of Metabolic Health Practitioners. LowCarbUSA provides a platform for scientists and medical practitioners to present the ever-increasing body of evidence on the benefits of reducing carbohydrates in the diet. It has now evolved into one of the primary resources for the low-carb community. The Society for Metabolic Health Practitioners is a nonprofit for practitioners focused on metabolic health. They have a panel of advisors which oversee and maintain the creation of a set of guidelines for therapeutic carbohydrate restriction, and also help establish a standard of care around carbohydrate restriction. And now, please welcome Doug Reynolds. Hi, Doug. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Rob. Very much for having me.
Oh, I'm so excited to spend this time with you and talk about so many interesting things. I think you and I share a common vision of educating people about the importance of metabolic health and its overall value. But before we dive into that, perhaps you could take a moment and set the stage and tell us how you came to be involved with such a fascinating area.
Yeah, well, I think that I started out, basically I was a distance runner. I wasn't an elite athlete, but I was pretty good. With the ultra marathon in South Africa called the Comrades Marathon, I finished in the top 100 a couple of times out of a field of 15,000. But I was still, I don't know, 2.5 hours or something behind the winner. So not an elite guy, but pretty decent athlete. And when I'm in my 30s, I could eat whatever I wanted, and felt like I was bulletproof. But as I started to get older, mid-40s or whatever, I started putting on weight. Like each year I would put on a couple of pounds. It was almost like you didn't notice it, but it never came off, no matter how much I ran. And I got a fright. One day I got on the scale and it was like 35 pounds or so over what I call my fighting weight, the weight that I used to be like all the time without struggling. And I was horrified. And it was amazing. Like literally a couple of days later, I got an email from someone actually trying to sell me exogenous ketones. And the subject was ketones, an alternative source of fuel to glucose. And it was just at the right time for me. And so I started investigating it. I didn't even know what a ketone was. I was 51 years old. I did not know what a ketone was. And for about 3 weeks, I dropped everything and I basically dove into this and I was studying it. And at the end of the time, this was a brand new company that these guys were trying to push on me, and they'd even run out of product. So I couldn't even order it if I wanted to. But I'd learned so much about it, and I was thinking, like, surely like doing this naturally is better anyway. And so I pulled the trigger. I dragged Pam to the store, which horrified her, and she was even more horrified that I had a list. And we walked around and I started putting all the stuff in the basket that was like freaking her out. All the fatty meat and full cream yogurt and all the stuff that we obviously avoided like the plague before. And I still even remember the very first thing I did was a couple of ribeye steaks that I went outside and cooked on the fire. And I came back in. I was so used to this real meat that I used to eat. And I had this big fatty steak on my plate, and there was literally fat like slushing around in the bottom of the plate. And I started giggling. Like, it was like, am I seriously going to eat this thing, you know? But I believed what I'd learned from all this scientific, information that I'd consumed over the last 3 weeks. And so I went ahead and I literally had to gag it down. And I programmed my brain so much against fat that I had this gag reflex. But like I got halfway through the steak and I was like, wait a minute, this actually tastes pretty good, you know? And I don't think I've ever looked back since then, you know? We learned as we went along, and over 5 months, I lost the 35 pounds that I put on, but a bunch of other conditions that I had, respiratory conditions, and you know, some skin conditions, and all sorts of little things. Pain in my knees, that was sore even if I wasn't running. That cleared up completely. And I started really enjoying running again. You know, I got back on the road, and I wasn't hating life anymore because I wasn't overweight, and I didn't have painful knees. I could breathe better. It was just incredible. And beginning of in January 2016, it was my birthday, and we'd been out with friends from work, and we didn't talk about keto with them because I was so sick of hearing it. They didn't want to hear it anymore. But once they'd all left, Pam and I were sitting there, and we obviously, there's like nothing else to talk about, like, except keto, right? And while we were thinking, like, how is it I didn't know about this? I didn't even know what a ketone was, as I said. So I can reach the age of 51 and not even know about this. And there's obviously a lot of people out there like me. And so how can we help? And that was where it all started. You know, I mean, I got up the next morning. The work that we were in, I had, one of the things that we did was put on these big conferences. So I knew how to put on a conference. When there were all these conferences, or not all of these, a couple of conferences around the country, but they were all really small at that time. And I thought, I was pounding my fists and saying to Pam, we need to put 1,000 people in the room, not 100. And so the next day, I started writing to a couple of people. And I had never been to a low carb conference. I didn't know anybody in the space. And I wrote to a few people, Jimmy Moore, Gary Taubes, Steve Finney, and Jeff Folick, I think, were the first four people I wrote to. I thought, if I can get a core of well-known speakers, then I've got something to build on, you know. Jimmy got back to me within like 10 minutes and said, how can I help you? And I said, well, I don't know anybody. So he introduced me to a bunch of the people on the speaking circuit. And most of them agreed, said, yeah, if you put it on, we're coming. And Steve Finney didn't know who I was and kind of said, don't you want to rather put your money into some research or something like that? And I said, well, I don't have any money. But Jeff eventually agreed to come. But the turning point was Gary Taubes. And he, you know, I mean, I found all of them just by looking them up on their website and filling in the contact us form thing. And I went backwards and forwards with Gary a couple of times, and he just filled me out, you know. And eventually he asked if I could have a phone call with him. And I was sitting on the phone with him, very aware of how much he charged for his time. And it was like, I always tease him when I introduce him to come up on the stage. I tease him and say, like, it was like I'd asked to marry his daughter or something. It was like an inquisition, you know. But he told me afterwards, like, he'd literally been invited to go and speak at places where they'd agreed to and did pay his fee. But there was only a handful of people at the event, you know. And he just wanted to make sure that I knew what I was doing. And so at the end of it, he said, okay, if you put this on, I'll come and speak. And I put down the phone, and Pam I had it on speaker, and Pam was kind of standing in the corridor, like listening. And I put the phone down and I looked at her and I said, shit, like, this is for real now, you know? And that was, I think, the turning point for me. It was like the fact that I had that conversation with him, that he believed in me and what I was trying to do enough to say, okay, if you get this going, I'll come and be a part of it. Yeah, I mean, I had to establish a website, a social media presence. We had nothing. And
yeah, Gary's such an amazing person. Just one note, I mean, if our listeners, our audience hasn't read any of his books, we've heard many of the speakers in this program talk about Gary Tops, what an amazing guy he is. I'm lucky enough I've known Gary for about 30 years. We go way back, and even I have to admit, he's probably one of the smartest guys I've ever met. And in his books, no matter what the subject are, and lately they've been right on metabolic health the last 10, 20 years or so, but he's just such a great writer. And then beyond that, like you say, he is a great human being. He's just a really nice guy. So
yeah, he's been so supportive of us, you know, and that was where we got the confidence to say, wow, that we can actually make this happen, you know. But as I said, we had nothing, and so we put that on in 6 months, from zero. I was going to say from zero to hero, but not so much hero, but from nothing to having an event. We didn't put 1,000 people in the room. But we got like 350 or something. And people had to talk me down off the ledge a bit, because I was disappointed that we didn't get what we were aiming for. But at the same time, if you compare it to what was around at the time, it was way bigger than anything else that had gone before us. And everybody that came was just so excited, and they were all saying, like, when's the next one, you know? And it was like, nah, this was it. Like, we wanted to put on a conference, and it was no, when's the next one? So I literally stayed up the whole way through Saturday night of that conference, creating a quick event page on our website for the fire. And I basically gave people a week from that Sunday to sign up again for half price. Sight unseen, right? We don't know who the speakers are going to be, but just on the faith that we do as good a job as we did this time, or better, hopefully. Yeah, and we sold like 84 tickets or something, and that actually helped us to pay the bills for that was still outstanding to put out in that first event. And then people asked us to come to Florida and East Coast and all of that kind of stuff. So in the January, the following year, we put on one in Florida, and now this last one that we did in San Diego was, I think, our 15th conference or something. We've done one in Jakarta in Indonesia, took a few speakers over there, which was an amazing experience. And yeah, I mean, that's how LowCarbUSA came to be. It was amazing.
Yes. It's such a fantastic conference. If anyone in our audience hasn't tried it yet, definitely look at your calendar. I've enjoyed the San Diego conference, and all the speakers are first class, and it's just, but above and beyond the speakers, it's a great social environment. Yeah. It's a great way to meet people. It's kind of a community. You feel like you've found your home, sort of, but you do a great job on that. And what are the upcoming ones that are currently on the schedule now?
Right, so we have 14th to the 16th of January is the one in Boca Raton. And then the next San Diego one is I forget I think it's the 25th to the 28th of August, last weekend in August. That's like our flagship event. It's longer, it's 4 days instead of 3 days, and we normally have more breakout talks and bigger expo and stuff like that. But the San Diego, the Florida one is always nice, because a little smaller, but it's much more intimate, and people get a chance to, like, everybody comes to dinner there. It's not like an add-on. And, folks get the chance to sit with the speakers and chat with them in a more informal environment. And it's just a really cool vibe that always comes out of the Florida one. And it was actually there that that whole concept of community kind of we became aware of how important it was. Because I'd done it before, and it was much smaller, and the expo was like right outside the hall itself. So I was sitting working, and they were still setting up, and some people were coming in to register. I was sitting on the end of the registration table, but I was starting to look up and smell the roses kind of thing. I was listening to the conversations of people, how excited they were to be there. And, the one girl was literally in tears, saying, like, I'm a health coach, and this is what I'm trying to do this for my own health. My doctors are telling me I'm going to kill myself. My friends are, a lot of them not even speaking to me anymore. And I shouldn't even be here, because I look at me, I'm still overweight, and I'm supposed to be teaching people to lose weight. And Pam said, no, man, like, just come and stay and see what learn from these people. And we just noticed her growth through that weekend. And she left like so inspired to go out there and help people again. And she said, it's like I got my family here now. Like I can talk to people about the problems I'm having and why I'm not losing that last bit of weight and whatever. And I'm not getting shouted at and being told that I need to stop doing this because I'm going to kill myself, And that was when I realized, like, the community part of it was so important for people to have a safe place to come to be able to learn about it and talk about it without fear of judgment and threatened violence almost. That's like they felt safe. And then it became even more aware of the fact that the doctors needed it even more than the patients, that they themselves were out in the wilderness because they couldn't go and talk about it. They go to their local organization meeting, annual meeting or whatever like that, and they might be the only one there that is practicing this way. And they can't talk about it because they get sometimes even in trouble, for talking about the fact that this is what they're advocating for some of their patients when it's appropriate. And so it's really cool for them to have a place where they can come and talk about it with their colleagues and learn and have the whole weekend of stuff where it's appropriate to their way of practicing. They go to any of their other meetings and they're not learning about metabolic health and lifestyle interventions as opposed to medication. They go to all these other things and it's all about the medications that can help all these chronic diseases that they're trying to fight, So yeah, it became more and more important to us to cultivate that community, that sense of community, and create a place where people could be safe. I think that's so that was yeah.
That's amazing. We'll put all the links to the show notes there. As you were talking, we'll have all the shows links down there of all the information. But
okay.
Yeah, it's so important to have that place where information can get out, where people can get things. Because like you say, at the sort of professional, so many of the medical meetings, they're funded and driven by
big pharma,
unlimited amounts of money from the pharmaceutical industry,
right,
and other another special interests in the food industry as well. And
correct.
This space, the interesting thing about this, I mean, we've talked about this in some of the other presentations, but I can write a prescription for insulin in about, a minute or two in my office. But for me to explain a lifestyle change that will accomplish the same thing for the patient and not require them to get the insulin, it could take 20 minutes or even longer. And the point is, it won't cost them anything. And there's no drug company that's going to benefit from it. So all the incentives are aligned sadly towards prescribing drugs and or surgery and this sort of thing. And the beautiful thing about lifestyle and metabolic health is that it can be done at low cost for the patient. But the thing we're facing is that it's hard to get wealthy interests that necessarily will sponsor it. I'm thinking, Coca-Cola sponsors the Olympics. What's that? A sugar drink for athletes, but millions of dollars.
But I mean, that's especially distance athletes. I mean, that's what you grow up on. You believe that that's what you need to drink in order to be able to function as and you have to keep drinking it through the race and everything, because if you don't, you're going to bonk. You're going to run out of energy, which is true if you're an athlete that operates on carbs. There's so much that we're learning now about the fat adapted athletes that don't require that, that actually can run a marathon on just water, because
is that right?
There's some incredible stuff going on there with that now, but there's only a few of them that are doing that, and people like Steve Finney and Jeff that are doing research in this area. But I think it's slowly, as some of the really, really successful athletes, it comes out that that's how they are functioning. More people will start to take it seriously. And, it's like everything with this whole lifestyle thing. It's like, it's like walking through treacle. It's taking a long time to get it going, but at some point it's going to hit this threshold and I believe in time become the de facto way to live and to train as an athlete.
Yeah. I mean, just not to get off track here, but for long distance running, is there any value, if you're fat adapted, is there any value for carb loading now? Is that
no? There's some people, and I still believe that it's the people that still can't get their brain over the fact that this is possible, So they train like this, but then when they get to the race, they say, "Oh no, you have to trickle some carbs in." Especially for distance races, you can't train for something and see what your performance is like, and then repeat that. And you can't do a trial and do the opposite, like do it on carbs once and then fat adapted the other time, because it takes you months, sometimes years, to train for this event. And then, that on that particular day, the weather and your biorhythms and all sorts of things, you just cannot compare it. Whereas a sprinter or something like that, like he can literally look at his times and see that it's actually coming down, And so there's a way to really to check that out. Whereas for a distance athlete, and the longer the distance, the more difficult it is to try and repeat something, trying different things. So it's really got to be about looking at the biochemistry and looking at the biology and looking at the science and believing in it. And I believe that if you are properly adapted, that taking some kind of glucose or something before the race is actually going to do you more harm than good. Because you're aware of it, the fact that if you, like this whole thing about if you're in keto and you have a high carb meal, you kind of drop out of ketosis for a bit, right? So if you get the morning before the race and you have a bowl of oatmeal or something like that, I think that all your fat adaptation now is out the window. And so now you're basically back to where you started, and you're running through that race, and you're going to be taking carbs through the race, and you're running on carbs again. And you've just undone all the work you've done to get fat adapted. But there isn't any really good trial or scientific research or anything that's been done in this. I think it's more what we believe, and what we believe based on what we've learned from as much research as we've done into, as I said, the biology and the biochemistry of how everything works. So at best, there's the idea that you need to, and they literally talk about like sucking a boiled sweet, having a boiled sweet under your tongue or something, and letting that trickle of glucose into your system as you're running. Maybe, I don't believe it would, but maybe it does. And one day there'll be some research that actually shows that. But I don't know. I don't believe it.
Yeah. I mean, it's fairly specialized and difficult to get that data. People are still arguing about just what regular people should eat,
Exactly.
that kind of thing.
Exactly.
So
yeah.
we have a long way to go on that. Well, it's tremendous what you've done with LowCarbUSA. It's such a great service to everyone to have that available for them. So the next step beyond LowCarbUSA, the next step in your journey was to put together go beyond an annual conference, but actually put together a scientific medical society. And that's really exciting, because that can do things that the conference can't do.
Definitely. Yeah. So, I mean, that was a progression as well. I mean, it started out with Gary Taubes, in fact. Like, I was talking to him about coming back to do the 2018 event, I think. And he suggested that we have a session to actually have practitioners in the audience come and talk about their experiences in trying to do this in practice, and what their difficulties were, and successes and failures and stuff. And it helped him because it was the subject of his next book. But I got to have him do his own talk plus a second session, right? So I got to keep him there for longer. And he introduced me to Adele Height, who he suggested we get her to mediate the thing. And he'd obviously been talking to her a lot about this offline. And so I got hold of her, and she just gave me this brain dump, of all these things like she had in her head of how she, like, her vision of where this whole metabolic health space should be down the road, and she talked about a malpractice suit that she was on the jury for, and that at the end of it, the judge had to explain to the jury what standard of care meant. And I actually pulled it up there since we said we might talk about this. But basically, what he told, this is the legal definition in the US of standard of care. The standard of care is defined as providing health care in accordance with the standards of practice among members of the same healthcare profession with similar training and experience, and situated in the same or similar communities at the time the healthcare is rendered. In other words, standard of care does not come from what is taught in professional training, from public health policy, or even from clinical care guidelines, although these can inform and help define a standard of care. Rather, standard of care comes from what a community of clinicians do in the actual provision of care. So it's an intangible thing. And it's really, at the end of the day, if the judge needs to understand it, he's going to call in 500 doctors and say, given this situation, what would you do? And whatever the consensus is, that is standard of care. And it evolves over time, which which makes sense because supposedly we learn stuff all the time, although there's so many doctors that hear about this low carb thing and still stick their heads in the sand and refuse to take it on board. But some of those things started to jump out to me because in the beginning it was just such a huge thing that she was talking about trying to do, is establish care, an alternative standard of care around carbohydrate restriction. So we're not even going to say they're wrong and we're right, just our metabolisms, people that don't eat carbs, the ones that are fat adapted, our metabolism's different. So the same standards shouldn't apply to us. But there isn't a recognized standard for outside of the current standard of care. And she said the very first thing that we do need, even though it doesn't in and of itself, it's not a document, the standard of care document, but a set of clinical guidelines would be a really great starting point. And she had been wanting to do this for ages, but just never had the tools and the wherewithal to be able to do it. And that was where we came together, right? Because I had access to, by that stage, so many of the people, like high-profile people in this space. And so we put a panel of advisors together that was, I think there was 15 people, really, high-profile people, Tim Noakes and Eric Westman and what's his name, Dave Unwin in the UK, and Gary Fetke, and like really prominent people. And she basically, like, I'm an engineer, right? So she said, "You're not a physician." She kicked me out the door, and I just provided the playpen and the space for her to work. And then she basically wrote this document and she bounced it off this panel until everybody agreed that it was at a place where we could publish it. And then at that time, I published it on the LowCarbUSA website. And it actually got a lot of traction and a lot of people saw it, but it really wasn't the right place. And I tried to implement the concept of a professional membership in LowCarbUSA to try and create these communities of physicians and practitioners where they could have these discussions around these guidelines. And in essence, eventually, those discussions would form the consensus that would become standard of care. But it just wasn't the right place for it. And it just didn't take off at all. I mean, the guidelines were out there and they went far and wide. But it just didn't go any further than that. And then Dr. Trokalasian, are you familiar with him from the Low Carb MD podcast, right? So he started writing stuff on Twitter about, we need a professional community for us carb doctors and stuff. And I got hold of him and said, look, like, we already have this concept in LowCarbUSA, but it's not working. So what do we need to do? And we got on the phone and chatted a lot, and then eventually kind of decided that the best way to do this was to create and establish a proper non-profit organization, medical organization, that was an umbrella for all of these people that were open to carbohydrate reduction. And in fact, so I got a board of directors there, including Rob Cyrus and Eric Westman. In fact, I think it was Eric's terminology that we ended up focusing on in describing the organization. And we moved away from the talk about keto and low carb and carbohydrate reduction and all of those things, and focused on metabolic health. So you'll notice that the Society of Metabolic Health Practitioners, right? And we focus on metabolic health and how to achieve that. And yes, some kind of carbohydrate reduction is for the most part a way to get there, but it's not necessarily the only way. And that's, I think, what I like about this, is that it's open to anybody that can come and show us evidence that a certain protocol of any kind contributes to improved metabolic health of any kind is welcome in this space, right? Let's learn. It's not for everyone. I think it's for, I personally believe it's for most people, but it's not for everyone. And we have to be open to that, and we have to learn how do we help those other people to maybe not optimally healthy, but healthier than they are metabolically. And so, yeah, I mean, so now then we migrated the clinical guidelines into the SMHP. And I think Adele is like beside herself. She's so excited because this, I think it took a long time to get there, and it took her a long time to get my brain there. But I think that was what she was, what she had envisaged all along. But she was wise enough to not overwhelm me completely, and let's start here with the clinical guidelines and build from that. And the whole thing, the evolution of it, kind of it just became a natural progression. And we've, yeah, I mean, I've done a lot of stuff in my life, but I'm pretty proud of this. It's, I think we're doing a lot of good, and it's helping a lot of people.
Well, and if you think about it, and I'm from the traditional medical institutions. I'm a medical school faculty professor my whole career. Basically, that's all I do is traditional medicine. And what you've identified here and creating this organization to go after this metabolic health, I would submit it's the #1 health problem we face in the world. I mean, beyond COVID, beyond anything else, looking at diabetes, obesity, and all the related disease, dyslipidemia, hypertension, heart disease, stroke, dementia, some cancers, you know the list.
Yeah.
And it even goes beyond that. But this is such an important problem, and this society is positioned right to it. I don't know why, why more people aren't behind this, and why it's not growing faster than it already is. It's a big issue about awareness. And
yeah. So I think I think the people that hear about it get excited and climb on board. It's a matter of people hearing about it, and we're still fairly small, and we the funds are still growing, but we need a lot of money at the end to actually put behind eventually advertising and stuff like that to get the message out there, because people are literally coming on board as fast as our reach is growing organically, slowly. And as we reach people, they think, wow, this is a good idea. And then they come and they either join up they can add their list as a provider for nothing, or they can join the membership, have access to some amazing so we've got a series of grand round talks we do like every month. And then we package them together in blocks of 6 to provide people with continuing education credits for, I think it's 10 credits per module. So as a member, you get access to that for free. We're busy designing and eventually put together a what's it called? A journal.
Oh.
So we will start where we'll be collecting case reports and stuff like that. But there'll be a charge for people to submit something to the journal. But if you're a member, then you get to submit for free. And then there's this whole concept of accreditation. So people we defined a whole bunch of different pathways that people can follow to show their competence. And once they've achieved that, we get a special badge that they can display that is displayed in the provider list for them automatically, but they can put it on their stationery or whatever website if they choose to, and they can use the credentials SMHP for metabolic health practitioner. And yeah, I mean, that, like, every day I get a couple of new applications now of people that have gone through the training. You know, in the beginning it was like slow, like we had 3. And I went through all the training myself, and I think I was one of the first people. Then we had a couple of people that just got stuck in, and they just, you know, within 2 weeks they were already up there, and then it kind of stayed there. But all the people I didn't realize it, but everyone was really excited. But they were all working on getting through the training or writing these big essays or whatever it is that they needed to do. And now recently, it's like all of those people are starting to come on board. So we're getting this trickle every day of a few more people applying. Like they've done what they needed now. Here's all the stuff and put in the application to get accredited. I think we've got like 50 people accredited now already, which is very cool.
That's so exciting. I love that you're doing the journal too, and building out the scientific part of it. I hope you're considering having scientific sessions at the, you know, given COVID and everything, but it's resolving, maybe a joint session with Low Carb San Diego or something, where you'd have scientific posters and papers presented from this society, because you can get a lot of, yeah,
I think so. We can try and do that and work out how that might look. One of the other things that we're talking about doing is putting on an actual medical conference under the, Tro actually has been aching to have one, at least in New York. So I think we're thinking that 2022 is going to be too soon, but maybe 2023 would do but instead of a LowCarbUSA one, it'll be a medical grade conference under the umbrella of the SMHP. In New York will be the first one, and maybe what we'll do then is, like, each year we'll have it, but it'll be like rotate around different cities throughout the US or something. And maybe, and I mean, it's an international organization, so maybe even, 1 year we might have it somewhere else in the world, like in the UK or something else. Who knows? I mean, I started out trying to put on one conference, and now look where we are. I think if I'd even had an inkling of how much we were going to end up doing, I wouldn't have had the strength to get started. So it was good that we started small. But yeah, we've just grown into it as you get comfortable. And that's always, like, every time I'm starting to get comfortable with the amount of work and the amount of stuff that we're doing, someone will come up with another idea, and it's like, nah. And then it starts, like, percolating in my brain. It's like, yeah, actually, we should do that, It's always like, no, I don't want to take on any more work. I've got enough. But then, yeah, you find more efficient ways of doing the stuff you're already doing, so that it doesn't take you quite as long anymore. And so you make bandwidth to get more stuff done.
Yeah, that's so exciting. I can't wait for those conferences coming up. That's going to be it's an exciting time in this whole space, and in medicine in particular, but the metabolic health is just, it's expanding. Why do you think there is such, it is expanding, but it's not expanding as fast as we did. Why do you think there's such pushback from traditional medicine? I mean, we see, things are, there's pushback on diets, there's politicization. You were mentioning of Ivor Cummins and his thing. That's a whole nother deal. But even within diets, there's, between the paleo and the animal plant sections, there's a politicization, and less so between high fat, low fat, low carb. But there's still this. What is the pushback on metabolic health?
I actually struggle to understand it myself. It's like, how can anyone look at the results and not believe that there's something to this? You know, I mean, Brian Lenskis is the other half of the Low Carb MD podcast that we talked about. I mean, he came to our conference in 2017 or 18, and he had been secretly doing it on his own because he was struggling. You know, he was getting sick and fat and sick, following the advice that he was giving his own patients. And then he learned about the low carb thing and tried it, and fasting as well through Jason Fung, and was having amazing results. And people were asking him what he was doing. He was saying, oh, no, just some new diet, you know? And then he came to our event and saw all of these speakers and, you know, international people talking about it, and realized like, whoa, this is real. And he went back, and then like literally that Monday, he started talking to his patients, not approaching them about it, but when they asked him, how come you're looking so good, doc? Like he would say, okay, if you really want to know, then this is what I'm doing. And if you need to go back and learn about it some more, but if you want to do this, I will support you and I'll help you. And he reached out. I didn't even see him at the event. I didn't know him at that stage. And he reached out to me in November, and we ended up meeting for lunch somewhere. And he was sitting there, and this is like 5 months later. And he said, you know, Doug, he said, I've been in, there was more than 20 years that he'd been practicing. And he said, I'd never, ever taken a patient off insulin. He said, in the last 5 months, I've had 11 patients come off insulin. And he said, I didn't take them off insulin. They took themselves off insulin. All I did was show them how they needed to change their lifestyles and help them to get that done. 11 patients in 5 months, from 0 in 20 years. And I was interviewed on that movie Fat Fiction, and I said, I was saying there, like, how is it possible that people can look at that and not believe that there's something worth at least investigating and looking at, or trying to understand, like, how is this possible? And when they start doing that, they will start to see all. And then, you know, Brian's a little example, but there's docs out there. Robert Sivas has been doing this for donkey's years as well. Also, like on this, like just with his patients, he's given up trying to talk about it at his bariatric surgeons conferences and obesity medicine conferences, because people were literally attacking him for it. And so he withdrew, and he still worked with his patients. He's got thousands of patients now, of, you know, stories and that of all these successes that he's had with this. Like he said, I'm trying to put myself out of business. He's a bariatric surgeon. He says, I teach people this, and most of the time, a lot of the time, they don't even end up needing the surgery. But if people, that information, especially nowadays, there's more and more and more of that information out there. How is it possible that a doctor can be faced with all this evidence and still absolutely categorically refuse to believe it's right? And even at times, like, attack those people, threaten to take them to court, all this kind of stuff. I mean, that kind of stuff's going on all the time. How is that possible?
Yeah,
I don't understand it. I literally cannot understand it, other than they are so brainwashed from their training that they cannot believe that they went through 12 years of training or whatever to end up here, and everything, at least about metabolic disease, about chronic diseases, that everything they learned was wrong. And they just cannot get their brain around that. They just believe it absolutely, this is how it is, because this is what I was taught, and everything else is just bullshit. And so these guys are heathens. And how else do you explain it? I don't know.
Yeah, well, let me highlight a couple things you said. I love the stories of the surgeons are going back, like Phil Ovadia, who's on the program, and he has his new book coming out, Stay Off My Table. He's a cardiothoracic surgeon who's now teaching patients about heart health through metabolic health, so that they don't need surgery. It's a great thing. And then you touched on the idea of deep prescribing. Deep prescription is such an amazing thing, and it's made possible through, largely in this case, through metabolic health. Thanks not only the diabetes medicines for type 2 diabetes, which is revolutionary, but also for hypertension, for statins, for dyslipidemia. We're seeing, patients come off those all the time with restoring metabolic health, and that may be one reason we're getting pushback from vested interests, certainly, that sell those things.
Right. So I mean, there's that huge pressure. There's the sugar industry, as you mentioned, on the nutrition side, they're pushing back against this whole concept all the time. But then the pharmaceutical industry as well. It's like, if we make everybody healthy, then I mean, if you stop everybody taking all these diabetes medications, there's pharmaceutical companies that would go out of business like overnight. And they're seeing that, and so they have active campaigns to try and undermine everything that we're doing all the time. That's what we're fighting against. And maybe the education or fake education or whatever it is that they put out there, and they inundate these doctors with it all the time, saying these guys are talking rubbish, and this is how it is, like how you've been taught is right, and here's the next better medication or whatever, and so maybe it keeps those doctors who are non-believers on the line all the time. Maybe it contributes to that.
Yeah, we touched on this when we talked about the standard of care, and also you mentioned it briefly. One form of pushback that some very prominent physicians have encountered is lawsuits from their professional medical executives. Maybe you could just touch on one or two of those. If you,
yeah. So I think that's the thing, is that, and that was Adele's whole idea, is that we have this place where because if you look back at the definition, they're talking about people with similar training in similar professions in similar communities. And so if we provide that community and we collate all that data, we were talking about offline about collating some imaging data, but if we collate all this data and all these conversations are in one place, and now we are starting to establish standard of care. It's not established yet, but it's a long way down the line. We have a set of clinical guidelines that everybody that's a member, and there's on the website, there's a thing where you can actually, like a petition almost, where you can add your name to a list of people that support these clinical guidelines. And as that list grows, now if a doctor or a physician ends up in court for some reason for advocating this lifestyle change, there's a community of people now that we can draw on, that these lawyers can draw on, that the judge can go to and poll these people and say, right, like, did they do the right thing? And obviously everyone here is going to say absolutely. And now, because it talks about similar training, these people, our community's gone through training about lifestyle interventions for metabolic health. So the only people that actually are qualified to actually have an opinion here are the ones that have actually done the training. Because if you haven't done the training, then you don't even know. So how can you have an opinion on it, right? And so the lawyers can argue this, and down the way, that I feel gives them a lot of protection that they didn't ever have before. And as this community grows, and as these conversations grow, and as this consensus forms more and more, they're more and more protected. And to the point where it might be a malpractice suit, but there won't be a malpractice suit for advocating this lifestyle intervention. It'll be for something else they did wrong, but not for advocating this lifestyle. That won't even ever be an issue anymore. I can retire then. Because, yeah.
Well, this is, I can't underscore how, I can't say enough how important this is. It's such great work you're doing. And I always like to ask, as an expert in this area, because of metabolic health, I wonder what if you wouldn't mind talking, Doug, about what personal choices you make. You've mentioned a little in the beginning, but what are you currently doing for your metabolic health as far as lifestyle or even supplements and choices like that?
Yeah, so as supplements go, I've found that this diet, and I don't like calling it a diet, but when we're talking about supplements, we're talking about nutrition. This diet, unless you have some kind of condition or whatever, obviously that, all things being equal, and without those kind of conditions, there shouldn't be any supplementation required. That's my personal opinion, and I don't take any supplements other than salt, if you want to consider that a supplement. When we started this, like we were, like it's so different. And being an athlete, especially, I was so phobic about fat and everything, and I was having to, introduce fat back into my diet and have fatty meat and, full cream yogurt and all that stuff. And it was like, we need to compensate for this. And so very focused on the low carb vegetables, kale and spinach and broccoli and cauliflower and those kinds of things, and like ate way more vegetables than I used to before, even when I was on the SAD diet, right? But obviously not the potatoes and sweet potatoes and all those kind of things, but the low carb keto type vegetables. And like we always focused every day on making sure we had a bunch of these vegetables on the plate. But over the last 5 years, and as I've learned more and more, I've started to learn that vegetables are maybe not quite as important as we were led to believe. And there's input from the carnivore community, which is strictly no vegetables at all. And yet there's people within that community that are absolutely thriving. And to me, it shows that maybe what they're saying is right. One of the examples that I have is Dr. Georgia Eade. She's a psychiatrist who spoke at she spoke at a few of our events. And we became really good friends with her. And she came, she's a brilliant speaker. But over the years, she was, even though things have improved immensely when she went keto, she still had some medical issues that she was still battling with, including the last bit of weight loss the plateau that she couldn't get off. And she decided to go carnivore as an elimination exercise. So the idea was to go carnivore and then start adding things, like see if it made the difference, and start adding things back until things went wrong again. And saying, okay, now we know what it is. She looks fantastic. She just loved it so much that she never even went to the next phase of adding stuff back again. She's just stayed carnivore and swears by it. So I have kind of migrated towards that carnivore type thing. I'm not an avid carnivore. I don't refuse to have ground pepper on my steak because that's a plant, which the really hardcore carnivores are like that, and like Pam still has some cauliflower rice and some spinach now and again and that kind of stuff, but most of the time I don't. Sometimes it's like got a bunch of cheddar cheese in it and then I'll put it on my plate, So I do sometimes. She does a thing with these large shrimps, and it's like an amazing dish that she does that has some broccoli and spinach and stuff in as well. And when she makes it, I eat it, But I don't eat a lot of vegetation, as I call it. But it's been as with everything that we've been through over the last 5 years, it's been a journey. And I may learn more down the road that says, well, what, you maybe you didn't see it, but 5 years down the road, you're going to see something that's not ideal unless you add something back. And if the science is robust enough to show me that that's the case, I'll add stuff back in again. You know, I'm learning every day. But I do tend towards the carnivore side of things these days, maybe in the last year or so, I'd say. And then, if you don't mind me adding in, one of the other things that we've got at LowCarbUSA, if you would have seen Dr. Ben Bokikio came to me a few years ago, asked if he could do a talk, and we gave him a breakout talk that year. And it was such a hit that sort of the next conference and from then onwards, he's been like on the main stage. But he's got this concept of, because we all talk about exercise, you can't lose weight by exercising, right? You can't outrun a bad diet, which is true. But his concept of high intensity exercise, what he calls smart training, slow, maximum resistance training. And the idea is that you do one exercise for each major muscle group to failure. So you choose the weight so that you fail in a window between 30 and 90 seconds. And you fail completely, like you literally, your muscles cannot do anymore, that particular muscle group. And then you move on immediately to the next one. Finish the workout in 20 minutes, in less than 15 minutes. And you do that twice a week. That's it. Wow. And so 15 minutes twice a week. Wow. In fact, I think that's the name of his book. 15 Minutes to Fitness is the name of his book, actually. And what he talks about is the fact that this actually activates the same metabolic pathways, or a lot of similar metabolic pathways to the ketogenic diet. And he's even had patients that refuse to change their diet, who have still had major metabolic improvements just by introducing this exercise. 15 minutes twice a week. Like anybody can do that, right? And I started doing that in 3 months. I put on 4 pounds of muscle mass at the age of like 54. Literally working out twice a week for 15 minutes. Wow. So that has been a huge epiphany for me. It's been those workouts are absolutely a part of our life now. In fact, I've got a whole home gym that I bought when COVID hit and we couldn't go to the gym anymore. And now, because it's in the house, it's literally 15 minutes. Like you walk over there. Encourage people to take a look at, because it can help get people over the hump. It can help people who really struggle to, especially like if they've got families where they can't get a proper keto diet in, because I understand families sometimes just can't do that because of the other family members and the pressure from them and the need to feed them what they want. This is a way to this is a game changer. It really is. It's an amazing thing that people should be aware of.
Great. Yeah, we'll put that information down there. As far as devices, do you use CGM or ketone monitors? I assume you're in ketosis all the time, pretty much.
Yeah. So for the longest time, I just knew I was, and I didn't ever. We couldn't afford to pay for CGMs and stuff like that. But the company called Levels is building an app on top of the standard CGM, and they asked me to trial this for them once, and so they gave me a CGM for a month. And so all I did, for the most part, it just validated what I was expecting. My glucose is down at sort of, I don't know, 79 to 85 or something, and it just like pretty much stays there, unless I do something like now and again we'll go and have a Starbucks coffee with half and half in it, like Breve, and you'll see the thing rise up to about 120 or so, and then come back down again. And what I did notice was that there was a huge spike at the end of my high intensity workouts, which we're still trying trying to understand. I know you said you watched the San Diego one. So Arthur Agatston, he's in Florida, and he's actually coming to speak at the Florida event as well. But his facility is there. So we actually want to go and do an experiment there, basically like a craft test. But instead of a glucose bolus, I'm basically going to do the workout.
Oh yeah.
Because I literally I would scan myself before and a few times through the workout, and then just before, immediately after I finished, and it was like 81, 79, 81, 81 all the way through. And then about 5 minutes after I was just like lying there on the bench, like trying to recover, and it shot up to 180. And then over 2 hours or something, it comes back down again. So so we want to go and do that. I want to see all the insulin responses and that through that 5-hour period.
Yeah, and that's
at Arthur's at his facility.
Oh, that would be great, and that's coming up for the January Florida.
Yeah, well, so I think I'm only going to manage to get down to his place like after the event, but
okay,
we'll definitely we'll probably talk about it at the event, and we will we'll publish all the results in that afterwards, because I think it's fascinating.
Yeah, and what you were showing on your glucose monitor, it shows the value of those things that
exactly.
we all.
Yeah, because I would have had no idea that was going on unless I'd had that thing on. So like I said, I didn't have any surprises because I wasn't eating any crap,
Yeah.
I wasn't. That's really useful for people that are just starting out, because then they can see immediately
exactly.
like the crap, the things that I didn't know in the beginning, that we thought were low carb, and they weren't really. That's a really good learning tool for that.
Yeah. And those companies
I was past that phase, but this was just like, wow, I had no idea. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's a great tool when you're starting out. And those companies like Levels, their CEO or CMO, Casey Means,
right.
Dr. Means is going to be on the program talking about. There's several other companies that are, I think Verta uses it, but
right.
These are game changers really to let people tune into their metabolism. We just need Apple to get it on their smartwatch.
Exactly. That needs to get where you don't need a doctor's prescription to get the CGM. I think that's everybody, and especially every doctor should have to wear a CGM, because I think that would do a lot to help some of these guys that have still got their heads in the sand. If there was compulsory that they had to wear a CGM for a month,
that's why
I think they'd be fascinated.
Apple Computer. Apple is going to put it on their smartwatch, hopefully next year, as well as Android. They have a patent for Raman spectroscopy, so it'll just go through the skin and do glucose monitoring real time, which will be a game changer. Just like you say, it'll affect behavior. If everyone sees it all the time, think what they're going to be aware of their metabolic health. At least the glucose indicators of it. But great things ahead. One last thing, how about fasting? Is that, you mentioned you and Jason did some work together, Jason Fung, on that?
Not really. He came and spoke at our first event. I haven't managed to get him back to anything since then. But I mentioned that Brian Lenskis learned a lot from him, and he incorporated some fasting into, like, I feel like it's a natural progression, like as you become properly adapted, you're not hungry anymore. And eating, Rob Cyrus is a big one. He says all this newfangled intermittent fasting. He says, I just call it eating once a day, and to eat once a day, once you're properly adapted, is like, most of the time I don't even think about it. I'm working and it's like 6 o'clock, like, hey, I better get something to eat, mainly because because it's supper time, not because I actually need. I'm never starving, ever. But I have never gone past 24 hours. I've never done an extended fast. I think certain people, it can be of some benefit to them. But I think, personally, I think that people talk about this far too flippantly. that I think once you go past 24 hours, maybe 2 days, I think Steve Finney even says that. He says like 48 hours is still okay. But when you start to get into 3, 4, 5 days, a week, whatever, like, you know, people just need to be careful, especially coming back from it, and be aware of the possibilities of muscle wasting and stuff like that. That some of the proponents claim absolutely categorically that it doesn't result in that, and Steve Finney is saying, well, that's not possible. If you look at the biochemistry, it's not possible, and so there's a lot of noise out there about extended fasts. 24 hours, 40, even 48 hours, I think are hugely beneficial. But longer than that, for me, the jury's still out. I don't know enough about it to really even want to do it for myself, and especially not to advocate it for someone else.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Doug, this has been so much fun today. I appreciate you taking the time to speak with us. Maybe you could tell our audience the best way for them to follow you on social media, and also your websites. We'll put them in the show notes as well, but you could tell them for people who are listening to the program.
Okay, cool. So the LowCarbUSA website is lowcarbusa.org, not .com, .org. And social media, it's like LowCarbUSA for everything. LowCarbUSA on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, anywhere. You'll LowCarbUSA, one word. For the SMHP, it's the same thing. It's the smhp.org. We have the .com domain there as well, so that points to the .org one, and the SMHP at Twitter, Facebook as well. So the SMHP or LowCarbUSA, pretty much you search for that and you'll find everything.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, and thanks again, Doug, so much. It's been great getting to know you this hour, and hearing about all the beautiful work you're doing to make people aware of metabolic health and these opportunities that they can go and participate in these courses and have a real immersive experience of community. It's a great thing. So thanks again, Doug, for being on the show.
Appreciate it, man. Thanks for having me.
Note: this is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking of it because of something you have seen here. If you find this to be of value of you, please hit that like button and subscribe to support the work we do on this channel. Also, we take your suggestions and advice very seriously. Please let us know what you'd like to see on this channel. Thanks for watching, and we'll hope to see you next time.